All right. First of all, welcome everyone to Agile Coaching Roundtable. So today is our second session, guest speaker session, and we have Zishan as our Amjad as our guest speaker, and to just talk about Zishan, I happen to just come across Zishan's profile because of some of the or kind of a video that I had done on the estimations, and Zishan kind of corrected me in some places. That's how I got to know about Zishan. And after then, it just took off, and we started interacting a lot. And there is a lot of learning that I have learned from Zishan. To just tell you all, Zishan is a author, is a co-author, and I mean, he has written many articles on Agile, and his articles are published as well. His presence is on everywhere. He is on Medium, he is on LinkedIn, and if I have to talk about his achievements or certifications, I would need an entire session to just talk about his certifications. He has done all the certifications from scrum.org. You name it, and he has done it. He has done all the certifications. If you just happen to check his LinkedIn profile, check his about section. I don't think anyone would have such a big about section on LinkedIn. I mean, he is a very learned person, and very humble. And you will learn a lot from him today. At least I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot. On that note, I think Zishan, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Ramaya. So nice of you. Such a kind words. I'm very humble and thankful for such a great introduction. And it's a mutual journey. Learning is mutual from both of us and all of us. And today's session, I invited all of you to join with me for uh, this session and have our journey together. So let me know when you are able to see my.
Yes, we are able to. Zishan, you're not audible. I think your video is also frozen. Okay, he's joining us back. Some technical issue with his system. So you will be joining us in few minutes. Okay, so in meantime, I would just like to inform everyone is that it would be, I'm assuming that it would be like 30 to 45 minutes of his session, and followed by Q&A. And Zishan is joining us from the US, and the current time over there is like 1:30 a.m. So I would request everyone to keep your questions ready, or I mean, whatever you want to ask, and let's not hold on much because I mean, obviously it would be like 2:30 a.m. by as we finish this session for him. So I mean, I would request everyone to I mean let him complete the session first, and then we would take up the Q&A. And as I mentioned, we are going to learn a lot from him. His contribution to agile community is immense. I mean, he not only works as an agile coach, or maybe in the agile community, or the background. He also uh, works on Azure side as well. So whatever you feel that you want to get the clarification on related to the topic, definitely you can get that clarified today. Yes, we have Zishan back.
Interestingly, this was not a planned thing, but interestingly,
Yes.
we did the agile thing. So that's actually happens. Unexpected thing happened. So
No
since
problem. And we did dry run as well, and we did not face this issue.
yeah, we did not face this issue.
Yeah, that's fine. I think you can get started, Zishan.
Yes, now I'm opening this presentation again and sharing my screen. Let me know when you are able to see my screen.
Yes, we are able to.
Great. Okay, so today's session is one of the very demanding session about the metrics because I know everyone loves to talk about the metrics. And I'm sure that all of you face this question sometimes in your career and feel free to share your experiences. So if we are going to have it a two-way conversation, that will be great. Otherwise, it looks like that it's a monologue and I'm talking to the laptop. And believe me, it is not a great feeling to talk to the laptop. So we are going to discuss one patterns or one metrics which is very common nowadays I observe, and that is plan versus completed the things. And when you are going to ask why someone actually is interested in this metrics, so usually we are getting the response something like this, that our end result, our end goal is try to make our velocity predictable. And in more than once, I actually came across this conversation that they were saying, okay, we are not asking you to increase the velocity. We are not trying to compare the velocity of one team with another team, but we are actually interested to see that whatever you plan and whatever you completed. So we are very much predictable and we can make the future plan accordingly. So this is what usually something similar you came across. Maybe you heard these type of stories. But let's try to understand what does it mean if we are trying to make the velocity predictable. Velocity is not equal to value. Higher the velocity does not mean that we are providing high value to the stakeholders. We may or we may not. There is no direct correlation. How many times we came across a situation when we actually release the new feature, or just take a look at the reverse way. How many times we came across a situation when the new version of the website or the software release and you don't like it because the things are not exactly the same place where it used to be before. It becomes a little bit difficult or become maybe a different workflow to achieve the same thing. What does it mean? It means that it is not the same value to you. So the releasing of the new feature may or may not be a value, maybe a negative value. So this is first important concept, that velocity is not equal to value. Then what the velocity is? Velocity is actually the effort. We are trying to quantify the effort, whatever the effort we are going to do in this particular sprint. And making the velocity predictable means that we are trying to make our effort predictable. And what does it mean by making the effort predictable? It means that we are trying to make sure that our plan is predictable. So if our plan is predictable, if we can plan everything correctly, then maybe we have to ask ourselves, is it really a complex domain problem? Is this really agile needed here? But since we are not going to in that particular route, we are not discussing the complexity theory and all that thing in detail. Let's focus on this particular matrix because our today's topic is more about the metrics. And here we are discussing the metrics plan versus completed. So initially I'm trying to set the stage, and after that I'm going to introduce the 12 anti-patterns that maybe arise when someone is trying to achieve this metrics. So now let's have a little bit question. Now my questions are, what if we discovered something new during the sprint? What are we supposed to do in that case? Are we supposed to update our plan? If we discover something new, it can be positive or negative. We might came across a situation when the things might become more difficult than what we anticipated earlier, or maybe easier than what we anticipated earlier. What are we supposed to do? We might discover some external dependencies which were not which we were not aware earlier. If we are not updating the plan in that case, then what is going to happen? If we stick to our plan, then how this is different than what we used to do in a waterfall approach? And if we actually update the plan, but we are not updating our sprint backlog, then how do we make our sprint backlog transparent? Because we are doing something, updated plan, but that updated plan is not reflected in a sprint backlog. So plan versus completed, it means that we are trying to stick with the original plan, even if there is a need for doing the inspection and adaptation. Even during the sprint, we are doing inspect and adopt. Daily Scrum is one of the formal opportunity of doing the inspect and adopt. And we came across something during the inspection and we need to adjust our plan. But either we refuse to do it, or either we are trying to stick with the original plan, or either we adopt the plan, we change the plan, but we are not making it transparent. So these are the important questions to think whenever we are trying to think about the predictability of the velocity. Now let's discuss something outside of the agile domain or outside of the Scrum domain. And by the way, feel free to interrupt me whenever you want. So it is not a single conversation. It is you are not muted. Feel free to chat. Feel free to speak. So this is a person who wrote the book The Goal, L.I.M. Goldratt. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. He introduced the concept of theory of constraint and wrote a very good book, The Goal. The Phoenix Project, which most of you are already familiar, is actually inspired by the work of this author, The Goal. And he actually wrote a very interesting sentence in this book, The Haystack Syndrome. Tell me how you measure me, and I will tell you how I will behave. If you measure me in illogical way, then do not complain about the illogical behavior. And how many times we came across this situation? We are trying to measure some teams or some individuals, and whatever the way we decided to measure, the teams started behaving like this. It is equally applicable to us. The way someone else is measuring us, then we are trying to change our behavior accordingly. And what does it mean? This is actually called the Hawthorne Effect. What does it mean, Hawthorne Effect? What is the Hawthorne Effect? Individuals modify their behavior to obtain a favorable perception when they are under the pressure of being observed. If you are not observing the people for some specific criteria, then they are behaving differently. But if you tell them that you are going to be judged by this particular behavior, for example, I used to have a very simple example, even in my job, that, for example, if I judge you that how late you are in this meeting, and even if you are late only 30 seconds in the meeting, then it is going to impact your annual review. And people will change their behavior, and they were trying to get on time on this meeting because they are being observed for that particular criteria. So this is important for all metrics, that whatever we are decided, people are going to change their behavior to get the favorable perception. This is called the Hawthorne Effect. Let's introduce one more concept. So first, I'm introducing this concept in a journal form, original form it is introduced, and then after that, I'm going to introduce a simplified version of this. So Charles Goodhart, they explain this concept, and the concept is any observed statistical regularity will tends to collapse once pressure is placed upon it for control purpose. I know it is difficult to understand, so let's take a look at the simplified version of this. And what is the simplified version of this? So Marlin Stratton said the simplified version that when measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. What does it mean? It means we decided we are trying to measure something, and most of the time we came across a reason that we are measuring because we want to improve. And so many times we came across the sentences like this: if we cannot measure, we cannot improve. Yes, if we are measuring for the improvement point of view, yes, I understand that thing. But if we are measuring in such a way that we want to get some target, if we made the measure as a target, then people are trying to game that system in such a way that you will get whatever you want to get. And as a result of that, you will get the numbers, the data, the dashboard, the tables, the graphs, all the tabular forms, but it is not showing the reality. And as a result of that, it is no more a good measure. It ceases to be a good measure. During my experiences of working in different organizations and different clients, I actually observed 12 different anti-patterns when we are trying to achieve plan versus completed. And maybe some of you already saw something similar. And I'm not claiming that these are the only 12 anti-patterns happen. And I'm not claiming that this is definitely going to happen. There may be more than this, and there may be possibility that none of this is happening. The way I am actually explaining this thing in my job, with my clients, during my writings, during my speaking is we have to watch on these patterns if this thing is happening or not. So let's start with those anti-patterns one by one and see if you can spot any of these anti-patterns. And feel free to speak. So yeah, we saw something like this. So this is one possibility to the situations. Teams intentionally pull the less work than whatever their capacity is to make their data looks good at the end of the sprint. And what is actually happening when the teams are doing this thing? Because of this thing, their sprint planning is no more transparent. Because they can pull X amount of work, but they are doing less than X amount of work. So at the end of the sprint, they can show that they completed that much % of plan versus completed. But their sprint planning is no more transparent. And if transparency is broken, then we cannot do inspect and adopt. Our empiricism is no more working. Not only that, if you are discussing with respect to the Scrum, then it also means that the team is not showing the Scrum value of courage. The team is not showing the Scrum value of openness. And the team is not even respecting the stakeholders, the product owners. They can do more, but just to make their data looks good, they are pulling the less work, so they will not get blamed at the end of the sprint. Everything looks good. Maybe some of you already observed something similar. Let's take a look at one more. Team focus more on the product backlog items, or most of the times people used to call it stories, than the sprint goal. And sometimes they even don't have a sprint goal. And what is happening if they don't have a sprint goal? Then there is no focus, there is no commitment, and there is no respect for the stakeholders. The teams only cares about if we can get X amount of stories done, so our reports looks good. whether that X amount of story is helping to achieve the sprint goal or not helping to achieve the sprint goal. Or maybe they don't have a sprint goal at all. So the focus shifts from sprint goal to the stories and PBIs. Teams focus more on the story points, stories, velocities, PBIs, than providing the value to the stakeholders. How many times you came across a situation when the main focus of the team is if we can get that much amount of work is done, so we will not get penalized, rather than the focus is if this particular thing is providing the value to the stakeholder or not. So again, the focus is shifted. The team changes their behavior. Someone wanted to say something? Okay. So let's take a look at one more. Team marks their product backlog items or story complete to make their data looks good, although it is not done as per the definition of done. I saw this behavior when the whole team, even the product owner said, okay, just mark it complete. And whatever the remaining work is, we will do in the next sprint. And sometimes they actually does in the next sprint, and sometimes they will never get an opportunity to do in the next sprint because they were pulled to do something else. But what is happening if they mark the thing as a done, although it is not meeting the definition of done? The definition of done is a commitment of the increment. And when we are not meeting the definition of done, our increment is no more transparent. So whenever we are breaking the transparency, our empiricism is not going to work. So again, probably you will see this pattern again and again, that one way or another way, most of the times we are either breaking the transparency or focusing on the data rather than on creating the value for the stakeholders. Let's take a look at one more. Teams inflate the estimation and adding the buffer to avoid having the bad sprint data. Just to give you an example, maybe the teams has a consensus that this thing is a 2-story point or a 3-story point, but as a safe side, they just make it 5, and not only for the safe side, but they are doing it because their data will looks good. So they are going to be in such a situation that they completed that much story points. So they pulled the 20 or 40 or whatever the number is, and they were able to complete 90% of that, whatever they pulled, 95% of that. And what is happening here? Now their estimation is no more transparent, because estimation is supposed to be X, but now they inflate the thing and it becomes Y. And just a side story related to this one that is not directly related to plan versus completed. It's actually happened in one of the organization, one of the client, when one of their OKR was increase the velocity of the teams 15% by the end of calendar year. And when I came to this particular OKR, I was saying, why should I wait for the end of the year? I can do it in a very next sprint. Just inflate the estimation. The team will do very similar to this thing, because increasing the velocity of 15% means nothing if we are not providing the value to the stakeholders. Team will just trying to game the numbers. If they know their annual increment, if they know their performance review, if they know their contract renewal, it depends on this OKR, it depends on this particular metrics, then they will definitely try to game the numbers. They will change their behavior. As we discussed at the beginning, Hawthorne Effect. People are trying to change their behavior to get the favorable perception. That is not a reality. That is a perception. The numbers looks good. The person who are reading the report or asking the report might be thinking they are doing extra work. They improve, but in reality, it is just a perception, just a non-transparent estimation. Team works extra hour sometimes over the weekend to complete the work to make their data looks good. So sometimes they are not trying to play with the number game. Sometimes they actually do the extra hours work. So they have some things to complete and they were working extra hours and weekends and extra spend some times to complete to looks the numbers good. But how many times they are able to do this thing? Is it sustainable? Can they do it with a sustainable pace forever? It is not sustainable. Teams cannot do this thing again and again. Not only that, again, this time our estimation is no more transparent because estimation is saying this is X amount of work, but in reality, teams are doing more than X amount of work. So again, we are breaking the transparency here. Estimation is no more transparent. Teams create some stories, usually in the technical depths, design, and spike, only to claim them done at the end of the sprint. So their data looks good. I came across one situation when teams reserved 20% of the capacity in such a way that they created some story and they will use whatever the names, spike or design or technical depth, or sometimes even the KTLO. The story is just a KTLO. And even though if they are not working a single second on those tickets, at the end of the sprint, they just mark it close. So at least they have the confidence that if everything goes wrong, still 20% of the plan versus completed they will achieve, or whatever the percent they decided. Now, in that particular example, I saw they decided the 20%, but some teams can decide the different number. So they just created something in the sprint backlog, which whether they do anything or they do not do anything, they just close at the end of the sprint. Yeah, we completed that many story points. So our report looks good. Teams first complete the work and then pull the sprint backlog. So they want to make sure that they will get the credit at the end of the sprint because they don't want to have that fear that if we pull the work, then maybe we will be able to do it, maybe we will not be able to do it. So they first finish the work, and after finishing the work, then they pull the sprint backlog. So here, what are they doing in the sprint planning? Their sprint planning is no more transparent. It is just they are trying to get their data looks good. Individuals in the teams inclined to pick the product backlog item or stories, they do have more expertise to make their data looks good at the end of the sprint. So some people might have an expertise on some specific area, although the product owner prioritize or sequence the PBIs in the value that the highest value should be at the top, but they tends to pick up the things which they are comfortable or they have expertise and they are having the negotiation with the product owner. And the whole point of negotiation is they should be able to pull only those stories or at least maximum number of those stories where they do have an expertise. So here the focus is not on the value creation, the maximizing the value for the stakeholder. The focus is how I can make my data looks good. So I'm going to pull only those type of work or majority of those type of works where I already have an expertise. So what is happening as a result of that? It is creating a silos, the local optimization, and it is also creating a lack of focus. Are they working as a team in this particular situation? If the PBI or story is partially completed, what the team is doing, the team is split into the two and mark one is a complete to claim the partial credit. So their data looks good. What is happening? For example, if the story is 5-point story or 8-point stories, and they did some work, but they are not able to finish it. What they did, they break that story into the two. Okay, how much work we completed? We completed almost half of the work, little over the half of the work. Okay, so this mark this story as a 5, remaining story as a 3. So 5 story is done, 3 story move to the next sprint. So at least we will get the 5 story point. We can claim the 5 story points. Done. So what is happening in this particular situation? That particular story is not completed as per the definition of done. It just is split. They just do it for claiming the partial credit to make their data looks good. Their increment is not transparent. And since it is not even completed, how can we get the feedback on the increment? How can we do the inspection and adaptation? Suppose even if they finish it into the next sprint, but what is happening? The partially completed story, which is included in the increment, not only breaking the transparency of the increment, but we cannot even get the feedback from the customer, from the stakeholders to the inspect and adopt. So inspection and adaptation of the increment is suffering. Teams introduce some stories as a maintenance or similar work every sprint and mark it complete at the end of the sprint to make their data looks good, to reduce the transparency. I think I discussed this thing earlier, where I was discussing another anti-pattern when the teams introduced some buffer stories, the spike stories. And here, and at that time, I discussed about the KTLO. So the team introduced some maintenance story, where in one of the experience I saw, the teams created 20% of the maintenance stories every sprint, regardless of what else they are doing. And no matter what they are doing with that maintenance thing, they just mark it close. So they
Zishan, sorry to interrupt. I guess Rohita had a question to
sure,
ask.
sure.
Rohita, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, and sorry for that interruption, Zishan.
Okay.
Because yeah, we were going ahead, so I didn't want an old question to interrupt some new slides of yours.
You want me to go back?
No, it's okay. No, not at all, not at all. So, Mike, since we have been discussing a lot on estimation, this word has been repeating almost every other, um, topic that is being introduced or discussed out here. Um, and I mean, as Scrum Masters, of late, there has been a new learning, that estimation, to base your estimation on the real data, is not the right way and not the right environment to create to effectively use Scrum or Agile. So, having said that, we are so used to bringing everything in terms of story points. Whenever estimation is talked about. So, I recently came across a very interesting post saying that. We should start using more reliable and probabilistic forecasting, when it comes to estimations. So it really didn't, I couldn't really elaborate on what it is meant by probabilistic forecasting. uh, so if you could share some light, and if you could share some other ways of interestingly or accurately bringing up these predictions on how much is the capacity or how much is the team, is, if we want to really put estimation in the right way. So since you're an expert in this field, if you could share some light on that aspect.
Thank you for asking this question. So let's take a look at from another way. In which city you are?
I'm an Indian citizen, but
No,
residing
in
in
which city?
Singapore.
No, in which city you are? Whatever the citizenship is, I'm asking in which city you are right now.
Singapore. I stay in
Singapore.
Singapore.
Okay, Singapore. Okay. Can you tell me what is the weather tomorrow for Singapore?
We have almost the same weather throughout the year, equatorial region, so humid, warm.
Okay. So can you tell me what is the weather 1 week from now?
I would say more or less the same.
Okay. So I have never been into the Singapore. Maybe, as you said, the weather is going to be
I
almost the same
understand
in
why you asked
Singapore.
this question. If, like, can you predict, how will it be 1 week, if assuming it has a constantly changing weather?
Supposingly, if the subcontinent, take a look at the subcontinent, any city in the subcontinent, take a look at how we are predicting the weather. Have you ever seen the weather news that there is definitely going to be rain tomorrow?
Yeah.
We are having the conversation. There is a 90% chance of rain. There is a 70% chance of rain. Something like that. And it's becoming more and more accurate if it is closer in the time frame. We will be able to tell the weather of tomorrow with more certainty as compared to weather of 1 week or 1 month or 6 months.
Yeah.
So take a look at the same logic here, the same concept here. We should be able to provide the estimation with more accuracy with the recent time frame, with a shorter time frame. Obviously, it is still a forecast. It is not a commitment, it is a forecast. We are forecasting that what we are supposed to do based on what we did in past. But we may or may not be able to do that because this is just a forecast. Our commitment is a sprint goal. And if we are going far into the horizon, if we are using the same Scrum and Sprint vocabulary and terms, that how certain we are 3 sprint from now, 5 sprint from now, 10 sprint from now. We are not so much sure. And we are going to use the forecasting that we, based on our past performance, this is what we forecast that we should be able to do. And if I am going in a little bit more detail, then it is not only about the forecast. There is one more thing which sometimes teams are actually not considering, that one is a definition of done. So whatever we are forecasting, the definition of done is a really important thing for our forecasting. But our definition of done is not static. We are improving our definition of done also. Let me give you some concrete example. Previously, we have a simple definition of done, just a standard definition of done. And based on that definition of done, let's suppose our team is most likely able to complete 20 story points. But during the retrospective, the team decided that they are going to improve the definition of done. And now the definition, in the definition of done, they are going to introduce that the team is supposed to have the 70% unit test coverage. But this improved definition of done is definitely going to impact what they are most likely going to be done in the future sprints. What do you think? Are they able to achieve, if even if the everything is equal, just for the sake of argument, assume everything is equal. Now, with the improved definition of done, do you think they are able to do exactly the same amount of work? I'm focusing on the amount of work. I'm not focusing on the value creation. Do you think, are they able to do the same amount of work in the future sprints?
I don't think so.
Exactly. Probably they will going to pull the less amount of work. So anyway, that was a little bit side conversation for with respect to the definition of done. But the point is that this is a forecast, and we are trying to forecast with whatever information we have right now, and in a shorter time frame, just like a weather, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's a tsunami, whether it's a rain, whether it's a tornado. The closer the time frame, we can forecast is better, but longer the time frame, there are more uncertainties. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we discussed this particular anti-patterns. Let's see what else. So the teams breaks the product backlog items or the stories pretty much like this is a design story, this is the implement story, this is the test stories, and so on. And the purpose of doing this thing is because they can actually claim some credit. If the design is done, okay, this story is done, claim that credit. Implement is done, okay, they can take that credit. Isn't it something like a mini waterfall with no inspection and adaptation? And even worse, if they are doing it in across the different sprints, just imagine one sprint they are doing design and implement. another sprint they are doing test, another sprint they are doing release, then how they are going to do the inspect and adopt? It is something very similar to creating a waterfall, actually creating a mini waterfall, waterfalls inside the sprint or waterfall that span in the multiple sprints. This is actually the last entry pattern, the 12th entry pattern. Now I'm going to mention a very interesting sentence written in this book. And if anyone of you want to become a really good product owner, I highly recommend this book. If you punish the bad news, you will only get the good news. Even worse, more accurately, the camouflage bad news made to look good. And this is directly related to what we discussed at the beginning, Hawthorne Effect. The people change their behavior. And if we are punishing the people on the bad news, then they will change their behavior and they will not give the bad news to you. And even if there is a bad news, they will camouflage that bad news to the good news. Before the ending the session, I'm going to tell you one story. Approximately 150 years or somewhere 150 to 200 years old story. And that story is around the New Delhi. So what happened around that time during the British India before the partition? New Delhi, there was a lot of snakes, a lot of cobras were there. And the British government wanted to get rid of the cobras. So what they did, they introduced the bounty that whoever is giving the cobra to the government, they will get some bounty, some prize, some money or something like that. So the main intention is that they will get rid of the cobra around the vicinity of the New Delhi. What is happening as a result of that? People start breeding the cobras. And they will have more and more cobras, so they can give it to the government and they can get more and more bounties. Pretty much like a side business. And one day, government discovered this thing. And what the government did, they stopped the bounties. What is happening after that? So all of the cobras, if the peoples are breeding, all of a sudden, they become a useless. They don't know what to do with that cobras because they cannot get the bounties. And what they did, they just released those cobras. And what happened as a result of that? Although the intention was good, intention was to reduce the population of cobra around the Delhi area. But what happened? They actually ended up increasing the population of the cobra. And that is why it is called the Cobra Effect. Cobra Effect is the unintended negative consequences of incentive that was designed to improve the society or individual's well-being. So whenever we are going to introduce a matrix, although our intentions are really good, yes, we want to improve the system. Yes, we want to improve the product. We want to improve the quality. We want to improve this thing or that thing. We have to be really careful because of the Hawthorne effect, because of the good heart law. That is there going to be unintended negative consequences we might face, that instead of improving the society or individuals or well-being or teams or organization, we are actually making it worse. Just like what happened during the New Delhi approximately 150 years ago. Instead of reducing the cobra, they actually increase the cobra. So if we are trying to make it predictable, are we really going to make it predictable? Or are we going to release the low quality product to the customer? Or are we going to just have a good numbers, have a watermelon effect, everything is green from the top, but red from the inside? So that's it pretty much for now. I just want to focus on one matrix, but it is such an interesting topic that we can discuss a lot of things related to the other matrix and matrix in general, that how can we create a matrix that is going to be improve the system, that is going to help us. That's it from my side now. Any question or anything else any one of you want?
Thank you, Zishan, for the wonderful session. And it was really informative and insightful. And I think we can open up for the questions. And as I mentioned, guys, so it's too late for him, so we'll not hold Zishan much. So if you guys have any questions or you want to clarify anything, you can please go ahead.
No question. My teacher used to tell me that if there is no question, then there are only two possibilities. Either you understand everything or nothing. I hope it is the first case.
True.
Zishan, Vivek here. So
I
I have a question. I have a question.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So I'm working as a Scrum.
Is it only me who is not able to hear properly?
No, she is not audible. Okay, maybe Vivek, you can go with your question first.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah. So, Zishan, I mean, though we every time, understand what those anti patterns are and how, but my concern here is like how, how do we get rid of this anti patterns? Though we understand that this is an anti pattern, we always need to focus on an empirical process and all those stuff. We always need to inspect, adapt, and have the transparency built within the system. But then the other side is like one is like we always interact with multiple people. When I say multiple people is like the stakeholders, the client, the leadership, and everything. And most of them at the leadership level, they focus on some or the other metrics to validate how the team is progressing. So that usually becomes a very difficult thing to manage or to handle in a situation where uh, uh, eventually intentionally or unintentionally people get into that system of the forging data. How do we manage that?
Sure. Usually I have a very simple question. I can ask the same question with all of you. Any one of you can answer. So I'm very much sure that all of you have an experience of shopping, whether online or in person or whatever it is. Tell me the last time you bought something because it was built using the Scrum. Have you ever bought anything because they use the Scrum to build that product? Or Kanban, or Safe, or Less, or Lean, or XP, or TPS, or anything like that. We are never
Zishan,
buying.
this is something you never even thought about it.
We never bought
So
the product because
basically,
of the process. We bought the product because of the value it is giving to us. When we are going to the store to buy something, we saw whether it is valuable to us or not, whether it is whatever I am investing, am I supposed to get the return of investment? So we are getting the things based on the value. So for the leadership, I want to have the conversation based on the value. And I ask them that this question, and I ask them another follow-up question that, okay, if you are a customer of your own team, what does this mean to you? Vivek, did I answer your questions?
Yeah, I got your answer, Zishan. I mean, uh, though I understand how the conversation needs to be taken up, but then eventually it's like as we were discussing a while back before getting into this session, it's by the end of the day, it's like looking into what is more practical, or looking at that paycheck kind of a thing. So that is where eventually we each one of we give it up. Okay, that's if they need it, just give that or publish that data. So that is what I was just trying to put across.
Yes, I came across this particular situation several times in my career. And uh, what we were trying to do as a Scrum Master or as a coach is, we just let them the awareness that this is what the current situation is. And we let them the awareness, what is their end goal? What are they trying to achieve? Are they trying to give the value to the stakeholder? Or are they trying to just make the good numbers and the good dashboard? In fact, in one particular organization, I came across one thing when one Scrum Master is so much keen about using the Scrum perfectly. What the end customer is going to do if you are doing the Scrum perfectly or not, if you are not, if the customer is not getting the value. Do you care, like the laptop you are using right now, the phone you are using right now, they use the Scrum perfectly or not? I even don't know they are using the Scrum or safe or less or all the fancy words. So
Yes.
now let's put this conversation a little bit more forward. So if we are having our metrics, those are value based, then definitely people are going to change their behavior accordingly, as we saw in the Hawthorne effect. And then their behavior changes are more focused on the value because that's what our metrics are. But if our metrics are more on the effort base, then they will change their behavior towards the effort. So if our metrics are how soon, how quickly we are able to deliver things to the customer, how satisfied our customer is, how much product they are using, what is the usage index. And there is actually a whole framework, evidence-based management framework, that is discussing exactly the same thing, where we are measuring, we are trying to measure the value created for the stakeholders. We are not trying to measure the effort. As I'm going to repeat myself, if I'm measuring that how often you are on time in the meeting, then you will change your behavior to be on time. Whatever I'm going to measure, you will change your behavior accordingly. So why not measure on the values? So you will change your behavior to provide the values. In one particular organization, I came across a situation when they have the Scrum maturity assessment, very much using the Scrum language. And I ended up in a situation when one team is Kanban. And I asked them and I asked the leadership, what are we supposed to do in that particular situation? The result is very interesting. The result is, let's create one more for the Kanban. I said, okay, fine. What if the team is using both? Are we going to do 2 assessment in that case? What if the team is going to use the lean? Are we going to create a 3rd assessment? What if the team is going to use a lean and Kanban? Are we going to use a new combination? Why not we are creating the metrics based on providing the value to the stakeholders, whatever the mechanics they are using, whatever the process they are using, whether they are using the Scrum or Kanban or Lean or XP or Scrum XP or any other combination of that. Otherwise, we will end up the Scrum assessment, the Kanban assessment, the Lean assessment, the Scrum XP assessment, and the story is going on. Did I answer your question?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I got the overall yes, I absolutely answered my question.
Lakshmi, you may want to ask your question.
Yeah, so my question is that when we are saying we are just giving the estimates, right, for the stories, not the actual timelines. So, but also we want to make sure that the work is getting completed within the sprint timelines. So, should I am in a certain stage now that few of the developers are not much matured, like every time they are not completing their stories. So should we give a very strict due date to them, or we can just say what they have given is a estimate and just let them work on their own? So how do we handle that?
Very interesting question. Thanks for asking. I am actually hearing something more interesting here, that some developers are not doing this thing. So let me ask you one question. Take a look at any team sports. Take a look at, for example, the cricket. I know cricket is very popular in India. So is it possible that some players are saying we won the match and rest of the players said we lost the match? Either the whole team won the match or the whole team lost the match. It is a mutual accountability. So if we are in that particular mindset, that some people are doing the work and some people are not doing the work, then basically this dysfunction is we are not working as a team. So the estimation is not, okay, I can do this thing in 2 hours or 2 story points or whatever the unit we are using. It is coming from the whole team. The whole team decided collectively that this is what we as a team think the effort is going to be. If we are not working that thing, then it is something very similar that the striker are blaming the defender and defenders are blaming the strikers. I use the soccer example. Bowlers are blaming the batsmen and batsmen are blaming the bowlers. They are saying, okay, we did our job, but we lose because of you. Did I answer your question?
Yes, yes, yes.
I saw one more raise hand. Raman?
Yeah, Raman.
Okay. Hi, Zishan.
I,
Zishan. So I work for a like service-based company. So I'm from Tech Mahindra, and our client is like British Telecom. So basically, in service-based company, like we work in like Spotify model. So basically, we work at 9 squads together in a single tribe. So here, what happened is like people from Tech Mahindra, like whoever are working from Tech Mahindra, like whoever are there in the tribe, reports to one manager. Okay. So here my question is like whom are a Scrum Master reportable to? And another thing is in my squad, I have a different PO, and other squad has a different PO, and that PO is my reporting manager. And whenever we have a collaborating call of Tech Mahindra, she has always complaints on my squad that you people are not performing well, and so go on. That goes on, and then like when I take this up with my PO, he was like, "We are delivering the best in our total tribe. Like among 9 squads, we are the best delivering tribe." Okay, and even the numbers speaks that. Okay, but always my reporting manager has complaints on my squad. So how do I deal with this? Every
uh,
week this happens.
uh, Here, first of all, I want to set the expectation that if we are not doing good, then what do you expect us to do? So here, I don't know the full context. Thanks for giving me the background, but looks like that there is a different expectation and they are looking from the different lens. So one manager is looking from one lens, and from that lens, this team is not meeting the expectation, and another manager is looking from the different lens. Uh, I'm not saying that this is your situation, but just hypothetically, I'm just trying to create a situation when one manager is trying to look from the story point or plan versus completed or something similar, and another manager is looking from the value to the stakeholders. So although from the one manager's point of view, you are meeting all the metrics, really good. Plan versus completed is always more than 90%. Velocity is greater than X amount, and you are increasing the velocity year by year. Everything is good, awesome. But from the another manager's point of view, customer is not happy. You are not providing the value to the customer. It is a buggy software. They are getting a lot of complaints from the customer. So this might be one possible situation. If that is the case, probably you have to you have to ask the manager to set the expectation how we are being measured. You said we are not good, then on what criteria you are actually measuring us, so we can check ourselves and we can adjust ourselves accordingly. Does it help?
Yeah. So I have one more question here. Like always, this thing goes on like in between our squads, like my manager squad and my own squad. So like, how should be a user story in Vishan? So like, should that be a very short one, or should that be a big novel kind of thing explaining each and everything?
Well, main focus is not the story. Main focus is the sprint goal. Stories are actually planned to achieve the sprint goal. And at the end of the day, the commitment of the team is to achieve the sprint goal. And stories are actually planned to achieve the sprint goal. And plan might be changed depending on the circumstances. And I think in one of the setting or one of the writing, I mentioned something similar. Suppose you have the plan to play some game like soccer. and you come up with a plan based on the circumstances, based on the opponent's strength and weakness and your own strength and weakness. But during the match execution, some unexpected thing happened. Your player might got injured, might got a red card, maybe something unexpected happened with your opponents. They might get injured or they might got red card. Are you still sticking with your original plan, or are you going to modify your plan? Because your goal is to win the match. Your goal is not to stick with a plan. So the same thing is here. Your goal is to achieve the sprint goal. Your goal is not to make sure that either we are 100% on the plan or not. What if you are 100% on the plan but miss the sprint goal? What if, take a look at this way, what if the soccer teams have a plan to play with the opponent and they are sticking to the plan and they are doing exactly what they discussed at the beginning, 100% as per plan, but still lose the match? Are they going to celebrate? Yes, we did whatever we planned. So my main focus is the sprint goal. The stories, they can change and they should change if there is a new circumstances, new information, because if you are not changing, then it means it is no more transparent. Because now it is not showing the current reality. Does it help?
Yes, Ishan. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think we are already 4 minutes past, and I don't want to keep Zishan still in the session because of the time zone differences. And I think it was a wonderful session, and you have gracefully accepted. Even in these odd hours, and also you have imparted a very good session. It was very helpful. I'm sure all of us who have joined have learned something or the other from this session. And as you rightly mentioned, the focus should be on more value delivery than on any of the metrics. And that was the, I think, need of the hour, because most of us are thinking from that perspective. And that again, when we talk about agile, and we say a lot that it requires a mindset change or mindset shift. So this is again a shift that we need to bring in for Scrum Masters and Agile coaches as well. So thank you so much, Zishan, for the wonderful session, and looking forward for more sessions from you.
Thank you, Vivek. Thank you, Ramya, for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to have such a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for
It was a
joining.
pleasure, Zishan, having you over here. And thank you for your session.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank you
Jishan.
everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.